Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. So as Professor Reddy, thank you, Professor Reddy, for inviting me for this webinar. And it's quite timely. In fact, if you have watched the schedule, we had to reschedule this webinar date a little bit because of some personal reason. But it became quite timely because this week we had the Earth Day, and Earth Day's theme was on plastic pollution, plastic or planet. So we are talking about this microplastics, which is essentially plastic pollution related issues in this particular week. So it becomes it kind of matches with what is going around in the world. And right now, even the UN plastic treaty negotiations are on in Ottawa, and we'll briefly talk about that towards the end of this particular webinar. So as mentioned earlier, any questions you have, please feel free to put it in the chat box. We'll be happy to take the questions. So let's get started. So when we say microplastics derived from traditional fossil fuels, so basically the plastics that we are using right now, predominantly it is derived from fossil fuel, and how the microplastics are coming from those traditional plastics. And then we will talk a little bit about their fate, how they are transporting in the environment, and what are the greener alternatives to plastics. Because when we say it's essentially greener alternatives to plastics, so that we don't have the issue of microplastics showing up that much. So when we start, if you look at the picture of plastic today, the data suggests that humans have created nearly 8.3 billion metric ton of plastic to date, outgrowing all man-made materials other than steel and cement. So we have made a lot of plastics. We have used lots of plastics, and we are actually going to use much more plastic. As you can see in this diagram right here, the number is expected to actually go up to around 34 billion by 2050. So a lot of plastics which will be being used. And if we look at 8.3 billion metric tons, that's like around 800,000 Eiffel Tower, 25,000 times Empire State Building, 80 million times Blue Whale, or 1 billion times Elephant, which is like 7.5 metric tons. And in terms of this is leading to a lot of plastic pollution. So today we are living in a world where plastic seems unimaginable today, like large scale production and use. We started only in 1950, so it's only like 70 years old. 1950, we are 75 years old, but in like 75 years, we have produced so much of plastic and we have consumed so much of plastic. And if you look around you right now, you have plastics everywhere. In fact, the computer that I'm using to talk to you and the devices that you are using to listen to me all predominantly has a good amount of plastic content. So, and if you look at, so what is happening? We're using this plastic, and I would say we are misusing this plastic. And because we are not managing the plastic waste properly. That's the major problem. We are not managing the plastic waste in an effective way. Only around 9% is getting recycled, as you can see in the here, 12% incinerated, and nearly 80% is accumulated in the landfills. And while they're accumulated in the landfills, while they are littered around, because of the UV and because of a lot of other stuff, it breaks down, creates microplastic, gets into pretty much everywhere. Every other day you hear something, some news articles or others which talks about that microplastics found in breast milk, in placenta, in blood samples, and salt, sugar, water, everywhere. So how to address that problem? So that's what we are trying to, we'll talk about that. So by 2050, it is that around 12 billion projected metric tons of plastics will be there. So in terms of plastic, if you look at where we are using it, we're using in building construction, we're using in textile, transportation, electrical industry, consumer products. But this 40%, that big chunk that you see, that is essentially that single-use plastic. This is our single-use plastic that we are 40% of plastic produced is packaging, used just once and then just discarded. So this is a nasty kind of like, do we really need to use that in that particular way? That's why I call misuse of plastic. We are misusing that plastic as a material has done actually a lot of good things to us. Many products that possible today was not possible when the plastic was not around. But since we misused it, we are not managing it properly, it becomes a problem. So what are the types of plastics? I think all of you know about this. Those of you have a little bit knowledge about plastics, so I'll not spend too much time on these basic slides. So from number 1 to number 7, any plastic product you pick up, you see these number 1 to number 7 listed: PET, HDP, PVC, and there are variety of products that are made using these different products, different polymer types. So in terms of plastic, if you look at the waste, which we are really worried about, globally, this is 2020 data out of OECD, and then CPCB, which is the Indian data, since I'm talking from India, so I put some Indian data there as well. So nearly 50% of the 353 million metric tons of global plastic waste generation, 50% just going to the landfill, and another 22% is mismanaged plastic waste. Globally, many places we don't really have engineered landfill, although we call it a landfill, they're essentially dump sites. Recently, you may have heard that in Delhi, one of our huge dump sites was on fire. And so when it fires, so plastics are also burning in that fire too, creating dioxins, furans, and other contaminants. So, and so in those dump sites, since things are not managed properly, you have plastic all littered around, goes to the stormwater, and then finally to the ocean. So 50 plus 22%, 72% is how you can say not that managed that well. 9% is recycled, 19% is incinerated. If you come to India, we have nearly 36% putting in our mostly dumps, and 47% is mismanaged plastic as per the Government of India data. CPCB is the Central Pollution Control Board, which is equivalent to the US EPA in India. So it's based on their data, we have that much, and 13% in India it is recycled. And if you look at in terms of the plastic consumption, as I was alluding earlier as well, it is the packaging which is the major chunk. It's a flexible part. Among the 40% was the packaging, and among the packaging, that flexible packaging, the thin plastic bags, which creates so much of nuisance. Then you have some rigid packaging, you have a building and construction, automotive, and all that. But this flexible packaging, where there is a lot of push to replace this flexible packaging because they wear and tear very easily into the environment. With so much of heat right now, with the UV rays and other stuff, it breaks down into smaller pieces, big part of the soil, gets blown away by the wind, and they break it down to from like a microplastics, and then eventually they can even become nanoplastics and create problem. So if you look at variety of places where we are using in terms of packaging, which is one of the major area, and then you also see that the variety of polymer types being used as well. As I said earlier, it's around 12% globally. The different data, different reports have different kind of data. This is the Indian data, around 12% is recycled. Earlier reports said 13% recycled, but more or less in that range, and 20% incinerated. Rest all is just ending up in our littered dump sites and other places littered all along the, if you go on the railway tracks and all, we see lots of plastics unfortunately littered there, which we need to really make, we have to do better. So globally as well, if you look at this problem right now, this problem is only going to get worse in future. We will be using lots of, this is the plastic used in million tons. In all the countries, you see there will be a huge increase in the usage. And then we will also see in different industries, this is the total usage, and this is the industry-wise usage. You see that there will be an increase. So we are right now around 2020. So by 2050 and 2060, there will be, this problem is only going to get worse if we don't have proper plastic waste management infrastructure. In India, if you look at the state-wise, what we see that although this is, we have not plotted it along the GDP per capita in the state, but if you put that, if you make that kind of graph, we see that states which are relatively richer states have higher plastic consumption as opposed to where the like a poorer states, or plastic waste generation is also higher in the richer state as opposed to the poorer state per capita if you look at generation. Recently, you may have heard this term plastic overshoot day. If you have not heard, this is a very recent, like we have an earth overshoot day. So similarly, this is a newer concept has come up, is plastic overshoot day. Now, what is plastic overshoot day? It's trying to tell us that on which day on a particular year, we have used up or created enough plastic waste that beyond that date, whatever plastic waste we are going to create is going to have a long-term negative impact on the environment. So in this 2024, a staggering nearly 32% of plastic that is produced and used is mismanaged as waste. So that means nearly 70 million tons of additional plastic waste will end up in nature this year. And by 2040, The plastic production will double, with plastic pollution also expected to triple down. Overall, in the globally plastic overshoot day, global is September 5th. So after September 5th, any plastic that we are going to use on this planet in this particular year, that will have a long-term negative impact on this particular, on our Mother Earth. And here the date-wise has been given for different countries, and these are based on how the plastic is being managed in this particular place, how the plastic is being mismanaged or managed in that area. So there are some countries, the 12 countries are responsible for nearly 60% of the mismanaged plastic, that which is China, India, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, those Indonesia, Egypt, Pakistan, USA, Turkey, and they are contributing towards that. On an average, out of 365 days, only 240 days based on the plastic waste infrastructure that we have globally, only 240 days production worth of plastic we are able to manage. Rest 365 minus 248, that day's plastic is just getting totally mismanaged in this particular planet, and that is going to create long-term negative impact. So how is it doing historically? Actually, it is we are doing more or less the same. There has been a lot of initiatives as well. There has been initiatives to have lesser plastic usage, going for alternatives, and try to have like there is a lot of campaign right now in terms of plastic ban and other stuff. So we see that more, but there is not that much of positive effect yet, but there is not much of negative effect as well. Especially if you look at the last 4 years, there is more or less the same. Months during which the plastic waste is mismanaged, you see that it's kind of it's almost August 28th to September 5th, so around within a week's time. And the amount of plastic has been increasing globally into plastic waste. And then more plastic waste is being well managed as well. So there has been slight improvement there too. So glass is always half full from me. So we can do things. So based on that, at least we can say that we can do better if we try. So it's possible to do better. Of course, we have to increase the rate. So, but why we should be worried about this plastic, isn't it? So why we should be worried about this plastics or microplastic? Because the plastic takes a long time to decompose. If you don't manage the plastic waste properly, if you just let it littered all around, it breaks down in, because of the UV and other, as I mentioned earlier, it breaks down into smaller pieces. Anything less than 5 mm, we call it microplastics, and it will create issues in terms of soil pollution, water pollution, and of course pollution finally on the ocean. So, but if you remember, this plastic as a material was created so that it should not degrade, isn't it? That's what the whole purpose of creating the plastic. So we have made a material which will not go bad. So plastic is doing its job. It's not going bad over the years. But since, again, you will hear me saying this again and again, I'm sorry if it feels repetitive to you, because that's very, very important, that unless we fix the plastic waste management on the land itself, we will see the issue of water and air, surface water and ocean pollution. Why? Because you see, these are last forever. And if you don't manage it, what will happen? It will break down and it will start being into the different environmental systems, 200 years, 400 years, and they are supposed to be. So we have to, especially these single-use items, plastic straw, or this 6-pack plastic rings, plastic bags. Can we cut down the usage of that as well? Can we use maybe bioplastics? So we'll talk about that in a few minutes from now as well. So where does all this plastic ends up? Because of the surface current. We have several plastic garbage patches in the subtropical gear, and as you can see, this is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I hope that animation is working on your screen as well. On the left hand side, you can see that animation and see that condition of this was a pristine ocean, very close to some very beautiful beaches. Now you look at what is the conditions there. And it's all mismanaged plastic because of you and me have created. And it is ending up in the ocean. And it is traveling all around the world, as you saw in the previous. So we have mismanaged plastics are there coming from pretty much across the globe. Some countries are contributing much more than the other, but there are only very few countries right now in which the plastic waste is actually managed well. So what is the problem with plastic waste mismanagement? Marine pollution, you already saw that, and ingestion by birds and marine fauna, entanglement of marine, destroying of coral reefs, microplastics, food chain and all that. If you uncontrolled burning, you have all sorts of emissions coming out. You have waste dumps and littering, soil pollution, mistakenly consumed by animals in food, leaching of toxic chemicals, and then if you have clogging of sewers, mosquito breeding, and all sorts of pollutions we are seeing there. So what is happening? So all these plastic which is mismanaged, these are the different sources which we talked about already: beach, ocean, ports, harbors, wastewater treatment plants, city settlements. Because of the pathways, the stormwater runoff, wastewater discharge, and then they get entangled, creates microplastics, gets ingested by the different animals and others, and then they get into our freshwater, floating plastic, landfill, and all that. So we did had some studies in terms of research that we have done here in India right now. I think Kasha Varaprasad, he is in the audience. If I saw him earlier. So this is part of his PhD work where we are trying to understand how much plastic is being littered around the beaches in a coastal city of India in Andhra Pradesh, Visakhapatnam city. We call it short form is Vizag. So how much plastic is there? What kind of plastic is there? And how they are really breaking down, and how much microplastics are showing up. So because we have a study going on in terms of the coastal plastic litter, where we looked at all these litters and we calculated the litter density, which is based on the University of Georgia. Some of you may know Jenna Jambax. She is quite famous in terms of plastic pollution work. And we have been working together for more than 20 years. In fact, she was senior to me in my PhD group at Florida. And so we do use her marine debris tracker and all those tools that they have developed. And we looked at what are the different sources of different types of plastics that is ending up, and how they are going to break down. So we are doing some lab-based study, creating artificial UV conditions and wear and tear condition with sand and all, and then see how much they will be breaking down and making way into the surface water and to the ocean. So some data from the field work. This is a still work in progress, not published yet. So it's paper is under draft right now. So we did see that before monsoon and also after monsoon. So as you can see, it's almost similar: 82% of paper, 86% plastics. Paper the numbers changed a little bit, and major content film plastics. The thin plastic bags or the food wrappers or the foams, they were the major components which are showing up. And there were a lot of other components out there as well. And you can see before monsoon composition and the after monsoon composition for fishing gear, foam, all other plastics. So there is a variety, and based on that, we are trying to see how they will be breaking down because of UV and the wear and tear and all that, and how much of microplastic, what is the potential of them in creating of microplastic. So yeah, the preliminary results suggest that average concentration of plastic was around 2.29 particles per meter square, which is higher than the global average of 1 particle per meter square. Mangaluru, and which is another few cities in India, Mangaluru, Thondi Beach, Mandavi Beach, they also had in fact Mangaluru found much higher numbers, but they all depends when the sampling was done, where the sampling was done. So you cannot really compare one study with the others just with the final results unless you look at the total the study design of that. So on average, we saw the land-based litter is around 86% and 41% litter is there in the sea. When the water is coming back, we are seeing some coastal seas also coming up. So as mentioned earlier, because of these macroplastics, they breaks down into mesoplastic, which is 5 mm to 25 mm. Then because of UV radiation, wear and tear, they produce microplastics, which is your less than 5 mm, and to go to like 100 nanometers, sometimes they say, or 1 mm. And then you have mini micro as well, which is less than 1 mm to 1 micrometer. So this is micro, this is mini micro. And the thing is that these microplastics can also, they have high surface area. So they can also become pathway of taking other contaminants with it. So if other contaminant gets absorbed on it, that can also go with that. And there will be some chemical degradation. There could be some like biodegradation can also happen. So there will be a transport getting into the sediments. So right now, only 5% of the plastics or microplastics is floating on the ocean. 95% is in the water column or in the sediments. So even if you do the like a sea cleanup, you're only going to be able to clean up only 5%. 95% will still be there. And you will, if you don't close the tap of the land for plastic pollution in the land, plastic mismanagement on the land, you will keep on seeing that ending up into the ocean. So we need to really make sure that we don't, we have to have proper plastic waste management system. So this is some of the literature review based on the literature review again of our Vara's work. So looking at different papers, the sediments, biota, sediment plus biota, as you can see all along the world, most of these plastic, microplastics and those kind of studies has been done along the coastal area. That's what I was talking with Rosa Reddy before the webinar started. And a lot of studies in Asia, Europe, Latin America, Oceania, and we are finding quite a bit of microplastics everywhere along this stuff. Is highly in microplastic is in highly restricted marine protected area as well, up to 2 to almost 2,000 items per kg in sediment, 7 to nearly 5,000 items in biota. Is multiple use marine protected area. It is also there. So microplastics, and it is interacting with different aquatic species. It can increase mucus production. It can be ingested by different species, bleaching or tissue necrosis, overgrowth, and all sorts of negative health impact is there. And we are seeing it everywhere. The microplastics are happening. We are seeing in the water, as I mentioned earlier, in different kind of food items, in fish, even in our rice, food fruits and vegetables, and also salt, sugar, and other places too. So there is a bioaccumulation because microplastics get into from the smaller species to the bigger species and to the biomass. It's getting into humans as well. And influx of microplastic in the soil environment, it's making a shift in microbial community, causes neurotoxicity, oxidative damage, increased mortality of soil animals, and then has a lot of negative impact. So if you look at in terms of different environmental system, so we did some work. This is again Vara's paper. Vara and Anjali, as he is also there. This work was done in collaboration with Professor Ajit Sharma, who is in New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand, my old colleague from there. So we looked at how much microplastics are showing up in the soil and what are what are the fractionation of microplastic from soil by density, physiological characteristics, and how to analyze them. That's another bigger challenge, how to analyze microplastics in different environmental systems. That was there. Then similar work was also done in the New Zealand environment. In New Zealand, in their surface water, deep water sediment, land contamination, and based on that, how it is impacting the food chain and all that. So this work was done by Goldie and Ajit and along with me on in New Zealand. New Zealand, you see a lot of work done in this particular area because they are very particular about looking at their environment because that's their biggest tourism industry. So in terms of microplastic in aquatic organisms, we also looked at what is the microplastic results available in India. So several papers again along the coastal areas. So that was summarized in this particular paper. So it's kind of more of a review paper and our some sort of policy recommendations and all that in terms of how much microplastic is there. So common microplastic can be converted to value-added products too. So in terms of where you can have syngas, char, composite, chemicals. So essentially, you're working with plastics and microplastics along with microplastics, as you can do a lot of pyrolysis, catalytic cracking, gasification. So it's from the if it can be collected. So, but I always make an argument that why even let it become microplastic? So we should try to capture it in the waste management system itself and then convert it to this different value-added products in terms of high temperature pyrolysis, carbonization. I'll show you some more example in some of the work that we have done in our lab. So, and then we have to look at the alternatives, especially this single-use plastic items. Those plastic bags and other stuff, which is creating a lot of problem in terms of microplastics in the environment. So we have to look for some alternatives to that. Paper bag, again, paper bag was if you go by the your manufacturing life cycle, if you do the life cycle assessment just of the production of a paper bag versus the production of a plastic bag, in fact, plastic bag has a lesser carbon footprint than paper bag. If you don't include the end of life, if you just include up to the production phase. So, and if you don't manage the plastic waste properly, which is happening right now, if you take the entire cradle to grave, of course, paper bag will be better. Cotton bag you can use multiple times, earthen utensils, bioplastic, which is another, most of these single-use plastics can be used bioplastic. Can we replace it with bioplastic? A lot of research is being done over that. And then coca utensils, paper utensils, gunny bags, and broad scrub, glass bottles. So there are a lot of different alternatives. Of course, there are pros and cons of different stuff as well. We will focus some on the green plastic, which we call like bioplastics. And very quickly, some of the background on, I think many of you may be familiar with that. Bioplastics is considered as a greener alternative to conventional. So there are two, it could be bio-based or biodegradable. Bio-based means that material product is derived from biomass, and which could be corn, sugarcane, or wood. Biodegradable means something which can degrade, can be converted by microorganisms through a biochemical process into water, carbon dioxide, and biomass. So unlike conventional plastic, which is based on fossil fuel, bio-based are derived from renewable sources. But this plant-based sources, because again, bio-based plastics also, if you don't manage it properly, that will create CO2 and methane in the environment too, because they are biodegradable, isn't it? If it's a biodegradable plastic you're looking at. So fuel-based plastic from petrochemicals, plastic recycling facility also releases CO2 versus your plant-based bioplastic, which are plastic products. But if you don't manage it properly, again, you will have CO2s and other things getting into the environment as well. But overall, it has a lower carbon footprint and GHG emission, low energy cost, reduction of permanent litter, it will degrade, and it's considered safer for environment. So there are different types: bioplastic, biodegradable plastics, conventional plastics, and plastic. These are the fossil fuel, these are the biodegradable, non-biodegradable, and you will have access to these slides. You can look at it again later on as well. So production of bioplastics, first generation was from corn, castor, sugarcane, wheat, all food products, but they are competing with the food products. So people moved to the generation 2, which was the straw, wood, lignocellulosic biomass. But then again, some issues with that as well in terms of logistics and all. So say that can we use algae, bacteria, and other stuff to paste bio-based. So there are direct biomass extraction. You get natural polymers and then you modify it. You can do the polymerization of bio-based monomers. You ferment, get the monomers, and then polymerize it. Or you can do microbial fermentation, which is pre-treatment, fermentation, and then extraction. So those are ways bioplastics are made. But if you look at the production of bioplastics in terms of all plastics which is made, bioplastics out of 367 million metric ton global annual plastic production right now, bioplastic is only 2.4 million metric ton. Its number is increasing. If you look at the number is increasing, but still it's what, less than 1%. Less than 1%, maybe around 70-80% of what we are seeing. It's like 2/3. So let's say 67% of what we see global annual plastic production. So why it is so? Although if you look at the numbers, it is increasing, and we are getting more bio-based. Bio-based non-biodegradable is right now around 52%. Biodegradable is 48%. All bio-based are not biodegradable, because bio-based means it has bio-based component, but it can have it may not be biodegradable under normal circumstances. But that number will, 2018 it will change. 2018 will, our target is to have more biodegradable, less bio-based and non-biodegradable. And then in terms of these, if you look at the different types: PLA, PHA, starch blend, regenerated cellulose, biopet, bio-PA, others non-biodegradable. So you have the different polymer type is there, which are available. And bioplastic production, if you look at the from the different countries around the world, again by 2023 and what is it will projected for 2028, you can see that Europe right now is 17%, which is around 18% again. Asia 51%, expected to go up to 56%, and North America around 20%, and which again we see actually there will be a dip. And because of North America, they have a target to reduce the use of plastics. Let's see if that's and then in single-use plastics, where the bioplastics are used a lot there. So, but why the global bioplastic share is less? Expensive raw material. A lot of research could be done in this particular area. The students who are out there, if you are for your PhD or postdocs, if you are interested, we would be love to have you. And then we want to work in like how to reduce, how to get this plastic made from waste-derived plastics and all that. Expensive downstream recovery process, competition with food stock, as you said earlier, food production, manufacturing process can be less energy efficient. They do not perform as well as traditional plastic in terms of durability. So how to improve that? A lot of material science related research needed, lack of awareness, uncertainty in end of life. Because if you have too much of bioplastics, it's actually a contaminant for traditional recyclable plastic. So how to manage that? The lack of standardization as well. But there are some innovations happening. Like people are looking at bio-waste, seaweed, mycelia, cuticle waste, like looking for 3D printing, electro spinning, green solvents, integrated biorefinery, bio nanocomposites, so value-added applications for biomedical end-of-life management, and also use some example of that as well. So in our lab, Anjali is there in the audience. This is her PhD, where we do a lot of work with hydrothermal carbonization, which I also presented during the last webinar I did as part of this series. So after hydrothermal carbonization, we get the hydrochar, but we also get this liquid hydrolysate, like we call it processed water. So it is a carbon source, sugar and BFAs. It is also nitrogen source. We use corn strip liquor. So we like inoculum was Cucurbitaceae nectar, and fermentation was done, and for PHA synthesis, and then we are trying to produce bioplastics from the like liquid processed water of hydrothermal after the hydrothermal reaction. The solid part can go for making of fuel, can go for even making of carbon material, which could be used as an energy storage material, and the liquid part can go into production of bioplastic, in kind of incorporating circular economy principle. So here some of the initial data from Anjali's work. So we are looking at in terms of bacterial growth curve, modified culture supported growth. Maximum growth was achieved at 40 hours of incubation, and GCFID also confirmed that presence of PHA. So applications, bioplastics can be there in most of our single-use plastic and some other applications as well. It could be used in disposable catering, electronics, shopping bags, sports, toys, coffee capsule, cosmetic products, and all that. And people are looking at possible future application of bioplastics in electronics and sensor, energy industry, soil bioremediation, all those different industries. Medical industries also people are looking at as well. So, but how to manage this bioplastics too? See, we're talking about this microplastics. So bioplastics will degrade much faster. So how to make sure that we don't mismanage the bioplastics? So we have to make sure that when we design it, its end of life has to be taken into consideration, proper collection, having a circular economy approach. So you have the bioplastic to, first of all, of course, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then reuse it. Final destination with mid, and then try to bring it back in terms of bioplast, circular economy concept, and bioplastic end of life. And this area we are also doing quite a bit of work in India. Right now we have an Indo-Sweden project on circular economy and waste management. So we are looking at this in terms of key steps involved in biodegradation. Of course, microbial growth on the surface, chemical enzymatic hydrolysis, microbial uptake, and then it will break down, and finally CO2, H2, and biomass. So we kind of talked about this already, then fragmentation, and then you get all that. So in terms of, we were looking at how to, when you go, we are looking at this microplastics from fossil fuel, as well as when you go to the bioplastics, you need to work on having a proper policy implication. So that work was again also done by Varaprasad and Abhishek and Sankar Chila, who all are my PhD students. These two have graduated. Vara is about to graduate. So we are looking at what kind of policy implications could be there in terms of different, and try to relate it to different SDGs. Again, if you look at the basic, it stays the same. You have to proper source segregation, reduce waste generation, reduce littering, awareness, institutional behavior change, reduce, reuse, recycle. So there is no rocket science here. We all know what needs to be done. Only thing is that the policy sometimes does not match with the capacity that our ULBs have. Our ULBs, we have to both physical capacity as well as the intellectual capacity of ULBs needs to be improved. ULBs for non-Indian audience is urban local bodies like municipalities or the city level municipal systems that we call urban local bodies in India. So we looked at in terms of how much microplastic pollution is happening country-wise, reported studies, and what should be done from a policy angle. So while we are talking about policy, one of the important policy things which is going on right now is the UN Global Plastic Treaty, where microplastic again is a big part of it. I'll not spend too much time on that. Again, as you can see, very much what we have been talking about in terms of having a full life cycle approach, a global circular economy approach. And then right now they are having today it is 26th of April. They have 21st to 30th April in Ottawa. The discussion is going on. And then finally towards the end of November and December, we hope to have this global plastic treaty getting a final shape, and we all will know. So coming towards the end now, so some of the other work that is going on in terms of plastic, as you saw that microplastic degradation work is going on. We are looking at how the microplastic is degrading in different environmental systems. And we are all working on how much plastic waste forecasting and all that with this Vizag City plastic waste litter study. We already talked about sustainable extraction of microplastic from water, like how to identify in the water sample, especially in the wastewater sample, how to do that. So if you have I would really encourage all the participants if you have some if you can share some information, especially in terms of analyzing these microplastics in complex environmental system. It will be great benefit to all of us, including to me here. So we are also doing some nowadays. Everybody works on AI ML. So recently we got a project where we try to see whether this plastic from all these dump sites in India and countries similar to India. So landfills or open dump sites are significant source of plastic waste. So here we are looking at trying to develop a validated model for quantifying the plastic losses to the environment from these dump sites, for monitoring the plastic flux using surveillance cameras and processing data through AI-based image processing architecture. So this project just started, and again, if you have some suggestions for this, more than welcome to how to. So we are looking at the flow field, critical shear stress, wind transport model, observed and estimated plastic flush, and then continuous surveillance video, image data set from dump site. Then we'll use the object detection based CNN and then validated model for plastic loss due to wind. So this is the graphical abstract of that particular project. So we are looking at different parameters, shape, orientation, mass, recyclability, plastic with food waste, size, density, and all these cameras are there. So we'll take lots of pictures, cameras for continuous videos, and using AI, ML, and other stuff, modern AI, and all those things will be used for that. This is the Anjali's work where we looked at where organic waste as a substitute feedstock, where bio waste, like making bioplastics from bio waste with biodegradable microplastics. I know, and then she's also looking at this is part of her PhD first paper, other than her review paper, has come out. So this is her PhD is all about right now. She's doing, again, as I mentioned earlier, getting this optimizing for process parameters for hydrothermal process, synthesis of PHA, then assessing of the environmental impact. We'll do some LCAs, and then she will also look at the characterization of PHAs and all that in terms of biodegradability of all. And recently, we have been working with also see when we talk about this, we made this bioplastics. So PHP is quite used quite a bit as a like a feedstock for making bioplastics. And for many times you don't use it as a like a PHP filament. You need some printed material, isn't it? You need some. So we did this 3D printing. This work was done in collaboration with one of our faculty members in electronics department. They were making this 3D printed shapes where to see for different kind of applications, even to make the cutleries, for example. So how much degradability will change when you move from PHP filament to 3D printed products? So that was tested using that standard BMP test. Those of us who knows degradation and all that, BMP is quite common, biochemical methane potential test. So we saw that the biodegradability of PHP filament was reduced by around 8%. So PHP filament was 8% more biodegradable than 3D printed. So after 3D printing, reduction was around 8%, not too much. So still it could be considered as a bioplastic. So we can 3D print this PHP filament to make different kind of products. In past, we have also done some work on single-use plastic and biochar composites for land reclamation, mine site reclamation as a fuel material. Biswajit and Vanapalli Raja, they both worked on their PhD on that, in this particular aspect. Very quickly, maybe another 2 minutes, and I'll wrap up so that we have some good time for Q&A. So this was a project done long back before COVID, where we worked with National Geographic Society. We looked at how the plastic is being mismanaged along the river Ganges. In fact, this was master's thesis of Gaurav, who is doing PhD with Professor Reddy right now. So he was there working on this project. You can see him right here with slightly more hair at that time. And then we tried to assess how the plastic is managed or mismanaged. In terms of, you can read that report is available on National Geographic. We looked at the plastic litter density. This was how the litter density was calculated, and how different types of plastic items which is getting into the to the river and finally to the ocean. And plastic food wrapper, tobacco cesses. One thing we found that in the northern India we see more tobacco cesses. As you come towards in southern to the eastern India towards Kolkata, you see more cigarette stuff. So different cities, we did have all this transact data and to see how much of different littered items are there, and then share this information with the urban local bodies, with the municipalities there too. So we also looked at how much plastic is getting into the river because of these drains. I'll go a little bit quicker. I'm running out of time. And then so these are all just pictures, a lot. And then one of the important stuff we saw is the plastic pieces are also there in cow dung, which is a bit alarming because if it's there in cow dung, then plastic chemicals could be there in the milk too. This is another work we did with World Resource Institute in terms of how to address this plastic ocean. So this is now slightly older data. We get this much ton of plastic getting into ocean, damage to environment, only 5%. These are the sources getting into the ocean from different sources of ocean pollution coming from variety of sectors. And then what are there? Microplastic, macroplastics, but there are other contaminants as well, and their impact on ocean health and economy, and what are the solutions? So this is like a blue paper or white paper, whatever you want to call it. So what things needs to be done and how they relate to the SDGs, how the interventions. So you can read that. It's available online for free, and it was also covered in some newspapers. So I think, and then most of the stuff that we talked about today and several other issues of plastic waste, we do cover in this MOOC course on plastic waste management. If you go on YouTube, put plastic waste management and my name, you will find the entire videos. Again, so that's so towards the end now. This is my research group, present research group. Some of them have graduated, but some are still in, here. Some of the older students are not here. So sorry, Gaurav, your photo is not here. But it's this is all the work that I'm presenting or have or present. This is the hard work of all these students, which make these things possible. So thank you, and I'm open for questions, whatever questions you have.